Hey, Donovan with Dreamtsoft here, and in this video we're going to cover some more REST API external integrations, creating your own API for inbound REST, and then also how to create this custom component here that utilizes the external REST post or REST GET to be able to reach out to an API, pull in a joke of the day, and then display it in a custom UI component. So that's what we're going to cover today. Real quickly, I'll reiterate what the idea is. So like I said, outbound REST post, I'm going to test it in our scripter. I'm going to turn it into a module so I can reuse it throughout the platform. I'm going to test that module in scripter. So that way I know I'm talking externally to REST API. Then I'm going to build a custom UI component, which is just going to be that joke of the day button. I'll walk you through how I built that. We can use that throughout the platform using attributes. You can make changes on it, so you don't have to go into the code every time if you want to. And then finally, it's going to utilize that outbound REST post module that I created in the first step. And then finally, what we can do is turn Dreamtsoft into a joke repository for external systems to hit. So we're going to create a custom inbound REST API. We're going to load the system up with jokes, and then we're going to be able to hit that from our browser or from an external system. And we can now return a joke from Dreamtsoft so people can hit our API and pull in a joke if necessary. All right, so let's jump in and figure out how we made this joke of the day UI component. So first thing I needed to do was hit the API. So what happened was I got an email that listed off a bunch of fun APIs. It was a blog and said, hey, you should try these out for developers, and they don't require any authentication. So started messing around with it, so it was pretty straightforward. All you have to do is go into Postman or something else, curl, hit their API, and it comes back with a joke. So in Dreamtsoft, if we want to do that, we can test out first without having to build any components or widgets or anything using our scripter. So as an admin, if you hit Option X anywhere on the platform, it'll slide in this scripter module. Now, this is where you can run quick and dirty tests. It can, using our F8 system, query our database, pull back that data, see how your script works. Once it's tested, we'll put it into a module. So paste what I had. Whoops, pasted it twice. If you're using scripter and you've typed something in there before and you want to get back to it, there's your previous runs. So it's got a library of, I think, 20 or 30 last runs of the script. So you don't have to retype it or repaste it every time. But what this is if you've seen our previous videos, this is using our HTTP scriptable. It's including that or requiring that. And then it is posting in the URL, which is this API that I found here. So I'm just basically putting that in as the URL, setting some header elements where this is the host, so the domain, content type, application JSON, and then you see in the instructions here, it says you need to put an accept header in, and now it's at the line 5. We just put an accept header, so it's returning JSON. Setting a variable here to use the get on the HTTP scriptable, so it's going to go out and do a get. It's going to return that. So we're going to set the body variable to the user response, and then we're actually going to get the response body. And that response body is a string, but it's formatted like a JSON object. So what we're doing here is just setting a JSON object to parse through the string response, and that way I've got something that I can filter through and get the element or the property of joke that's returned in the JSON object. So I hit play, it reaches out, hits this URL, pulls back, and returns with a console log of the joke. You can see that here, joke, and there's my joke. So now I know this works. So what I want to do from here is put it in a module so I can use it throughout the platform. I can use it in triggers, I could use it in buttons, I could use it in custom UI components, which we'll build. But first I want to get it into a module. So you click the gears, go to your file system, down to the modules folder, and that's where I created a file called jokeutils.js. If we crack this open, you can see I'm just creating a class here with a function called getJoke, and I've pasted the exact same script in there that I tested in scripter. One caveat is, of course, I commented out the console log, and I just returned the JSON object.joke. So anything that calls this, of course, that's the response that they're going to get. So now I can use this anywhere in the platform. And if I want to test it out in scripter again, just to see if it's working, I can do that. So Option X again slides it in. I'm going to paste this. So basically all I'm doing, just like I included the HTTP scriptable in my module, I'm going to include that new jokes utils. So this is the bundle name, dev jokes, that I created. And then this is the actual folder. I'm calling the jokes utils file, and then joke is going to be the new joke function in there. Now what I need to do is console log the actual joke just to double check and see if it's working. Perfect. Now I've taken that script that I had before, I shrunk it down to 4 lines, probably 3 lines of script, and I can use that anywhere I need to in the platform. So now I want to utilize that in a UI element or a component. So if I head back to my home page, this is the result. Click the button. It's got some styled button here. It's got a little movement. It's got a title, and then down below it actually gives me a new joke of the day. So this is a custom component. So if I go to Gears and Files, I can see here that there's a folder called Components, and I created something called Headline. So you just go create a new folder, name it whatever you want, and then in that folder you want to create 2 files. First is the folder name client.html is the naming convention we have, and then the folder name or the component name server.js. So these two talk to one another. Of course, the client is going to use our templating language or templating library to display the HTML and run some onload and Ajax functions, and then the server is going to go back and get all the data and send it back to the client. So if I open this up, there's some unique things in here that are unique to Dreamtsoft. Of course, we need to call it an F8 component. Our kind of back-end system is called the F8 system, and that's where you define it as an F8 component. Then you put in the definition of the component, the ID, the headline, or excuse me, the label will be what the users see, admins see to drag and drop it onto the page, the server class, and then if it's renderable. Down below are attributes. Now these are extremely powerful things that make this portable. So I created one called title, and that basically allows me, when I drag and drop it on a page, to ask for specific pieces of information, and then that will populate the UI component itself. So what I mean by that is, if I were to go to this home page and I wanted to edit this home page, I'm going to take this headline off and I'm going to drag it and re-add it. You'll see the first thing it's asking me here is title. So I can say, new joke of the day and 4 exclamation points. And what that does, when I hit OK, instead of saying random joke of the day, this is the title area. So new joke of the day. So that attribute, that's a very simple one, but it allows you to to make it portable and also ask the questions that you need to in order to make this thing function. So if this was static, I might not need to change the title. I could have just kept a joke of the day, but now it enables people to add it to their own pages and change the title if they want to. And I could have done the same thing for the button text if necessary. So the way that looks is I've obviously put in my attribute here. If you do need help defining the attributes, there is something called the Widget Manager Designer in the platform. So after your bundle name, you can just widget _ manager _ designer, and that will help you build out attributes. So if you wanted to put a choice box in there and create that type of attribute, now over here, this has defined both of these attributes, the title and the choice, and I can just copy this and paste it directly into my component if I wanted to add that choice box in there as well. So I'll actually do that. And now if I were to go back to my home page and do the same thing, add it and delete it, you'll see that I have a second attribute that's going to ask me for there. So headline, oh, you have title and you need 1, 2, or 3. Now, right now, that choice box is not doing anything because I haven't used it anywhere in the script. But if we want to see where I'm using that title, we'll jump back into the client and go into that code. So I have my definition. I have my attributes. We just created one of those. Attribute display rules allow you to decide if something's visible, mandatory, etc. So you can build those out. There's some examples of pre-built ones in the system, but it puts a little more process around the design of the UI component. And then you have your style section, which this is just normal CSS. So I snagged some CSS from somewhere on the internet that gave me that cool looking button. And when you mouse over it, it does that movement. So that's all just standard CSS in the style section. Then we get down to this templated area. This is where you define your template and go ahead and put in any HTML you have. And then down below in the script area on load, it's going to go ahead and pull in that template information and use that template and draw that HTML. And then it's I'm also binding this function, this my function down below, right here, to the button called my button. So here's my button up here in my template. So I'm binding this on click event to this function down below. And this function is passing in, or is talking to that server.js file that we created. And we'll jump into that in a second. But it's looking for an AJAX function called getJoke. It's passing in a couple basic arguments here. These are not even necessary. I just threw them in for demo purposes. And then it's doing this callback function, or it's putting this callback function as an argument, which you can see here, this joke response is pulling in the data that server.js file returned. So it's returning a property called myData in the data object, in the response object. I'm logging it out, but then I'm also grabbing this headline object, which is really the joke headline, and I'm updating it. And you can see that this headline object exists right here, and that's where I'm getting it and updating the inner HTML. So that is the client side of it. And like I said, right here is where we're calling this AJAX getJoke. So let's jump over to the server side. We'll start from the top. So you just load a page component in there, and that's going to help communicate back and forth and require this page component create class or function. You can see I've got a bunch of comments in here as I was testing out, but really all I'm doing right now is just returning a status response good on my my basic onload function or default function here. I created this AJAX function. I called it getJoke. You can see commented out here are those two arguments I said were just demoware. So if I needed to use those variables throughout my script, if I wanted to go query a table or something like that, they would be available to me. But right now, all I'm doing is utilizing that new joke module that we built in previously to go out and say, okay, joke utilities, go get the joke, set it to a joke variable. And now I'm going to return my data here as a my data. And now that's where I get the joke from. So the server file is going out, doing the HTTP scriptable via the module that we created. It's gathering that information and it's returning it to the client side. And then if I go back in the client side, once again, you can see that's where this ties in to the response.data. There's a data object returned from that. And then my data is the property that I put in there, which has the joke and the rating and all the other information that the joke database has. So I hit OK. I go to my home page and I click the button and there it is. Works. Now, once again, if I wanted to go in and change that title, all I have to do, say funny times, something like that. And now that makes this completely portable. You can use this throughout the platform and doesn't have to say the same thing every time. So by building components and using attributes, you can really make it where admins don't have to go in and update any of the JavaScript once it's complete. You can literally just make those attributes variables that they can populate. And you'll see that with a lot of our pre-built components too. So if you're dragging in something even like a calendar, it's going to ask you what calendar that you want to use, what's the initial view, day, week, month. These are all attributes that feed into the script of that component. So if I had some pre-built calendars here, then I'd be able to show you. Okay, so we've done the first two, which was really kind of my main goal, which was have that joke of the day button. But we created the outbound REST functionality, which is reaching out to the API. We tested a couple times in Scripter. We created it as a module so I could reuse it. And then what we did was we built out the HTML of the custom UI component. We created the client file, we created the server file, and I'll post those on the wiki. So if you guys want to copy and paste those, I'll include a link in this video so you can get to those quickly. And then we utilized in that custom component the outbound REST post module to be able to make that reusable. And we also built some attributes in there so we could change the title. So you can see how these Lego blocks start to piece together, and you can use these in different areas of any application. So that's one half of the coin. Now, the second half is to mimic that API and make Dreamtsoft a repository of jokes that people could use externally. So they could hit our URL and then it would return a joke to them. So basically I'm doing a copycat of that REST API that we used in the first section. And so in order to do this, the first thing I did was I went and created a table or a bucket, but it is of type table. So if you've watched our previous videos, you know that you can have different types of buckets, and essentially they kind of simulate data repositories. But I created the 4 fields in here that is returned when I hit the API. So body, category, joke ID, and rating. And then what I did was I imported a bunch of data via CSV that has all of these different jokes. Now, I got these from the internet, so they're not my jokes. If there's some risque jokes in there, I'm not responsible for it, but they looked pretty decent in there. And the way I did that was I essentially went out to, grab the CSV file of jokes. You can drag and drop it, import data via CSV. Then you simply pick the bucket you want to drop it into, and you pick the category. Now, one thing you want to be aware of is they have a slot in there called ID. We also have an ID slot that's our ref ID, but that's why I named this one joke ID. So that way it would line up and I'll get the joke IDs. But that'll be the primary key. So you can flag that. I can hit import. I've already done that, so I won't do it again. But I got 3,000 jokes that are imported in there. And now I have my repository. So I can show data. I can see all of these jokes. If I want to, I can click on one. And I didn't set up my form. I need to go do that. But that would show the form of the joke. But I want to be able to make this external. So we have pre-built REST APIs for every single table. That once you create a table, you can do the CRUD operations. So if I wanted to, I could hit that table directly. But I want to show you how to build a custom REST API. It's basically going to do the same thing, but it's going to grab a random joke instead of just grabbing, querying, looking for an individual ID of a joke. So you click the gears, you go to miscellaneous, go to REST APIs. This is the one I created. First line is there is a util library in our base system called random utils, just like the joke utils. It's just a way to get a random record. So this allows me to go through and just pick a random record on that table. And then I'm creating this joke class with this process function. So anytime you hit this path here, and I'll show you that path in a second, then it's going to run this process function, and it's going to go through and do some logging. And then it's going to get the body of this, set the content type, return a 200, use that random utils that we included, that library. It's going to get a random object, or a random record from the joke bucket, and it's going to grab the body of that. And then it's just going to return that as the API. So there is something I want to call out here. So for people that have been using console log in Dreamtsoft, that's generally how we will debug. So for a quick refresher, you can hit Control-Shift-D, and that will get this. That will make the little bug appear in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you can use your console, your browser console, to log any of the console logs that you have in the system. But there's a caveat there. If there's something that's happening back on the server, you can't actually see those logs because they're happening essentially almost asynchronously. So how do you get that data? Well, you can do this WS console, and what that will do is basically post any of those to a channel, a WebSocket, and then you can subscribe to that in your browser. Once you have this line in there, you can go into your browser console and you can paste this code, and you're subscribing to that same channel here. This ID is used for the subscriber itself, and it's basically, you can type in anything. It's a way that if for some reason we need to unsubscribe, we at least can identify the subscriber. And then it's just basically around this callback function going and saying, if it's an error warning message debug, then just highlight it differently in the console. But now that I have that, if I want to hit this API, and in order to do that, you can see the URL here. So it's the space I'm in, which is sjoke, and then API, and then the bundle, and then the path that I created on the REST API. So this path here. So once again, your instance, the space, API, the bundle it belongs to, and then the path you created. And then when you hit that, it'll reach out and it will do that random, and it returns a random joke. You can also see if I scroll down, oops, this has to hit undefined. If I scroll down in my browser console, I should be getting a response here. And I'm actually not. Oh, I can see. I'm actually hitting the wrong space. This was another space that I was working in. So let's try JK. Oh, and of course the bundle, I'm not consistent, is called jokes. So now I get a random joke in there. And if I scroll to the bottom, there it is, first message. So that is exactly what I'm posting here. There's nothing else in the body of that message because I'm just hitting it via just browser. So I'm not posting anything else in the body, but I'm able to hit first message there. So if you are doing any kind of logging out, make sure you use WS console instead of console log, because otherwise you're not going to get any console logs and you're going to think it's not running and it's going to drive yourself crazy. We have it. You can hit it via URL. You could take Postman and you could hit this same URL. Keep in mind that I did keep it public. If I wanted to flag that as non-public and require authentication, now this is not going to work. Oh, sorry, I'm already logged in, so I've got a session. But yeah, if I were to hit this from an incognito browser, then it would not actually return a joke because I would set it to non-public. So we've done it. You've got the ability to go get a joke of the day. You could put this on any portal. If I wanted to, I could even create my own flow and reuse that navigation menu or reuse the script I created in the module to say, you know what, I actually want the left hand to say, I'm going to get a joke. And I could do a run script in there where I'm going to go get that joke. I can create an output called new joke, which is a string. So this is a portable variable in our workflow designer. And now I can say action.output.newJoke is equal to joke. So now I've got my joke and it's set to a variable. And what I'll do is I'll grab that new joke option and I can put it in a confirmation box. So I'm using the exact same script I had before, and I'm just going to use that. That's my new joke variable in there. So it's just basically going to occur in a pop-up. And now I'm going to drag that there, hit save. So now I've got to refresh to get my second menu option. So now I've got two options. I've got the ability to click it here and it's showing up in my UI, or I could click get joke and it's going to pop up with a different random joke in a pop-up, and that's just using it via flow. So once again, I'm going to fall back to the Lego block thing. Once you build it, you can then use it if it's a module or UI component anywhere else in the platform. So a lot of times when you're designing this, if you think it can be used in multiple places, obviously get it working first, but then you can take a step back and say, hey, what attributes could I build into this to be able to make it more portable? What script could I take out of this to put into modules so I can let other areas of the platform utilize those modules and I'm not kind of hard coding script into one certain area. There it is. We created an outbound REST post. We took that script and we put it into a UI component, so we're able to display the data differently. So those were kind of steps 1A and 1B. And then step 2 was turning Dreamtsoft into kind of a joke repository that other people can hit, utilizing a custom REST API. Hopefully that was enough to get you started. I will have a Wiki article with all of these little script components on there. And you can use them as examples. If you have any questions, feel free to email us or hit us on Slack or however you want to communicate with us, and see what you can do with these Lego blocks. Thanks a lot.